Good evening and welcome back to Sports Talk ATL. I am Chase Earl, joined by Alex Lord. The Georgia Bulldogs, the 2 seed in the college football playoff, and have probably the best road to getting to the national championship. I mean, they obviously get the first round bye. They get the winner of Indiana and Notre Dame, which they should feel pretty confident getting that game. I believe in a favorable situation with whoever they play, then the winner of Penn State and Boise State, if Penn State wins.
Favorites win.
But like that side of the bracket is much easier than Oregon's,
Well,
right? You get Oregon, Ohio State potentially, then Texas in that
Tennessee.
round. So this is the favorable side of the
Even
bracket.
Clemson, the worst team on that side of the bracket, Clemson. I mean, let's not. All of the bad teams are obvious, but Clemson might be the best of the quote unquote bad teams.
But they just beat SMU, and they're the 12 seed.
I mean, SMU, I just saw, these are all hypotheticals, would be touchdown favorites. If they upset Penn State, they would be touchdown favorites over Boise.
This though, they do have their own hurdle to overcome, and this is going to be the biggest hurdle. I mean, Carson Beck, the injury that he suffered against Texas, it's a torn UCL, which is something that you see in baseball. That's Tommy John surgery. That's the internal brace surgery that we've talked about, Spencer Strider. It's very unusual, especially considering the way, that's usually kind of a wear and tear kind of injuries you see in baseball. Like it happens, you throw, like you overuse it, and eventually something like that happens. This seemed to happen on a hit in a play. Like it was like he was hit at the end of the half, and all of a sudden he's hurt and has a torn UCL. Very, very odd injury that you almost never see in football. But in baseball, it's a 12-month injury. So there is some rumors that it could still be intact and maybe potentially down the road. But it looks like this is Gunner Stockton's team. It looks like that's going to be the case, especially early on in this playoff. Maybe Carson Beck has a Willis Reed moment and comes out there and saves the team if they need him in the second half and they fall behind. Who the hell knows? But right now, it looks like this is Gunner Stockton's teams. And if you're the Georgia Bulldogs, you do have this favorable road to get to the national championship. But can they win it all with Gunner Stockton as their starting quarterback?
Fortunately for Georgia, this is the weakest field I think we're going to see in a 12-team college football playoff. I really do think that. There isn't a single team, even with Gunner Stockton, where I go, oh, yeah, Georgia can't beat them. I can't eat any of them. Oregon, Texas again with Gunner Stockton. Notre Dame, Penn State, Tennessee. Every single team has glaring weaknesses. I don't want to say that the Georgia Bulldogs have been doing it without Carson Beck. Carson Beck hasn't been, a Heisman Trophy, winner. He's been much better over the last 6 weeks than he was in the first half of the season. But this Georgia Bulldogs team is scrappy enough. I think that Gunner Stockton presents a world where I think this is on Bobo. I think Bobo has a few weeks to cultivate a plan where they are just going to accentuate Gunner Stockton's legs and virtually make this Georgia Bulldogs team a glorified 2-quarterback system. And basically what you're doing with Gunner Stockton is you're just going to, lean on his legs, ask him to make a few big throws a game. And quite frankly, more often than not, that's what a lot of teams are asking, their guys to do. When Alabama's at their best, that's exactly what Jalen Milroe did. Now, I'm not saying Gunner Stockton is as athletic as Jalen Milroe. Only a fool would say that. But this presents a special opportunity for Mike Bobo to flex his muscles, to cultivate a plan, to accentuate Gunner Stockton's legs. And I think that if you're looking at it from the other side of the table, whether you're Penn State or Boise State or Notre Dame or Indiana, whoever eventually faces them, that's difficult. You have no idea what you're going to face.
Yeah, if you're Penn State, just talking about it the other side, you're looking at Georgia, who now is down a backup quarterback. You're looking at the fact that you get SMU instead of Alabama in the first round. Obviously, a much more favorable matchup. And then you get Boise State. They're like, when I saw that bracket, I was like, this is the luckiest. Because we all agree Penn State's frauds. They haven't beaten a top 25 team. They haven't really looked that competitive against the number ones and number two teams.
The USC game tells you all you need to know.
Yeah. But if there was ever a scenario where you could potentially talk yourself into Penn State reaching a national championship, it's this year. But then on the flip side, you can say the same thing about Georgia with Gunner Stockton. So, I like the way Gunner Stockton came in. I like the way that he came in. He had a little Stetson Bennett to him. You could tell that the guys around him responded to him. And then if you hear the guys talk about the faith that they have in him, you can tell that it's not, there's some clear belief that he can do this job.
After the game, Trevor Etienne, and a couple other guys were like, that he does it the right way. He shows up to practice. He does his job. He's been waiting his turn. And now it might be just his turn.
Yeah. I mean, and it's funny because we talk about the Georgia relation to Alabama, right? And how they've seemingly done everything so similar. And Georgia now has this reputation where despite not really having the best team, they keep finding ways to win. And you saw that constantly under Nick Saban. Now they have this opportunity to kind of do the Jalen Hurts Tua thing. And I'm not saying, he's Jalen Hurts or Tua, but it's the same hey, we're going to take a backup quarterback. We're all going to rally around him. And somehow we're going to find a way to win this thing. And they definitely have the road to do it, right? And it's very possible that they look up at the end of this thing. They take care of Penn State or whoever else they have to play. And they face Texas again, who they just beat with Gunner Stockton in a tie game coming in the second half. So yes, if you're asking me, can they do it? Absolutely, they can do it. There's absolutely no reason why they can't do it. It's all about protecting the ball. And frankly, Gunner Stockton might be better at protecting the ball than Carson Beck, as we've seen over this year. So if you can protect the ball with that defense, you have a chance to win. They're going to have to play differently. It's not going to be easy, but they got 3 weeks to prepare. And who do you trust with 3 weeks to prepare for this entire new thing that nobody knows how it's going to play like? But who do you trust the most? It's Kirby Smart. And as long as you got that guy standing on your sidelines, just like Nick Saban before him, it doesn't really matter who's calling plays. It doesn't really matter who you have on the field. You feel like you got a shot. It's like the ultimate wild card ace up your sleeve. And that's what he provides this Georgia team. I mean, if you were going to pick anybody in this college football playoff bracket, who would you pick over Georgia?
I hate to say it. Maybe Notre Dame. Because just as easy as Penn State's road is, Notre Dame is pretty easy too. And Indiana is more formidable, I think, than SMU. But Notre Dame has a pretty easy – everybody on this side of the bracket, the bottom side or whatever, depending on which way you look, has a pretty easy road because you're getting Boise State, you're getting Indiana, you're getting SMU, and those are all tier below, way below Notre Dame, Oregon, and Georgia. Now, obviously, you have to go through the other two at some point, but I think Notre Dame is quietly not being talked about enough. I mean, they have all the pieces in terms of, NFL quality talent. I mean, the roster is as good as any in the country. Now, if you want to say Georgia's or Ohio State's or even Oregon's, I wouldn't argue with you. But Notre Dame is right there. And I think that if you're talking about, Penn State's road, well, Penn State, if anybody, still believes in James Franklin getting it done against a high quality opponent, I don't know what he has to do for you to stop believing in him. But that's not the case with Notre Dame yet. That's not to say it won't be true, but Notre Dame doesn't have that monkey on their shoulders. Believe me, Penn State players, Penn State coaches, they all see everything. Well, they don't even have to read the news. They're on the sidelines for every James Franklin game. James Franklin cannot get this job done. I think Notre Dame's a good pick.
No, I mean,
because again, you're getting Georgia.
I will say this about Georgia fans. They are kind of mocking the fact that Notre Dame coming to their place will be this walkover win. And I want to tell you that will be the toughest game of this entire path until you get to potentially the national championship. Yeah. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Yeah. I mean, Notre Dame's very similarly built to Penn State, except I trust Riley Leonard a lot more than I do Drew Allard, and I trust Marcus Freeman. I trust both of them. Yeah, but I trust both of them. I trust their quarterback more, and I trust their coach more, and their defenses, I would say, are similar. You could maybe even give the edge to Notre Dame based on what we saw in that Oregon game. So, listen, I'm right there with you. I think Notre Dame, when you talk about matchups early on in this bracket, that potential second-round bracket, that's a very, very tough matchup. I don't care where that game's being played, especially with the backup quarterback, especially with a lot of time off. And listen, you know what we talk about in baseball a lot, where like a team, like we talk about the first round buys, how they affect teams. like a team with momentum. Let's say Notre Dame goes out there and crushes Indiana and they played a game and they played in the environment of this new playoff that's no one has ever felt before. And then they get to go in and they kind of feel it again. I wonder how that dynamic, works in this field. I mean, obviously in football, you think they're extra rest. And I do think with injuries this late in the season
for specific teams, I think it's, we need the bye. Georgia needed this
yes,
bye.
no doubt. But I do think there's another aspect where you go in there, you kind of shake off the cobwebs, you go beat up on a team that you should beat.
Notre Dame didn't get, they got a bye effectively. The bye in terms of what it presents is in the college football playoff. I think more than anything, it's a time to get healthy. I mean, these SEC schedules are a grind. I mean, Georgia just went to 9 overtimes in the past 2 weeks. So, this is a Georgia team that is, though battle tested, they're run down and they're still trying to look inward and figure out who they are. Meanwhile, Notre Dame, got that health factor. And though Indiana is a great story, Signetti this, Signetti that, this game in South Bend is going to look eerily similar to the game earlier in the year between Indiana and Ohio State, where it's just like, yeah, we're just still some 5 stars away if you're Indiana.
I do agree. I mean, I like Notre Dame a lot in that matchup. The one thing I'll say is I've been hating on Notre Dame all year. They proved me wrong. They proved me wrong. They proved me wrong time and time again. I've been waiting for Marcus Freeman to do, I mean, he did it against NIU, but to me, he always has 2 of those. Is the second one finally in the college football playoff? I don't think so. I like Notre Dame. I think that's a very tough matchup in the first round. I think Notre Dame is up there, just like you said, with one of the best teams in the country. And when you have a backup quarterback who hasn't played in 4 weeks, it's going to be a very intriguing development. So that's a game that if it does come to fruition, is going to be a really, really fun one, especially with them. Well, I guess they won't come to Georgia. It'll be in New Orleans. So which crazy atmosphere for those 2 teams, Notre Dame and Georgia and New Orleans. We got more football talk coming up after the break.